Hi, I'm Doug Taylor, the CEO of the Smith family, and welcome to Conversations with the Smith family. And today I'm joined by Dr. Sue Thomson, the Deputy CEO of the Australian Council for Education Research. G'day, Sue, and thanks for joining us today.
G'day, Doug. Thanks for that.
And to start off, just kind of putting things in context, Sue, at the moment we're facing some significant societal challenge with COVID, cost of living, and I'm wondering if you can kind of connect those to the challenge of how young people experience educational inequality. What does that mean for those young people and their families?
I think that's a really good point, Doug. I think what it means for those children and their families is that the resources that they have access to are sort of, for a number of children, have dried up. And particularly with the cost of living increase, it's going to be even more difficult for those children. And I think what we found during COVID was that the disadvantaged students were the ones who suffered the most educationally through that period because of that lack of resources. And I'm not talking about just physical resources, I'm talking about intellectual resources as well. So, parents that can help them with their work, parents who know where things are going, parents who know how to use the educational system. So I think all those things become more difficult for disadvantaged students, and therefore they turn off education at a much greater rate at a much earlier point of time, which we need to address all the time.
So taking a step back from thinking about the challenges today, pre-pandemic, how are we going as a nation in addressing educational inequality? What's the kind of underwriting challenge that sits there for us as a country?
Pre-pandemic, we weren't doing well in addressing disadvantage, which is unfortunately why the Smith family continues to exist in their Learning for Life program, for example, and has even bigger numbers. Which, whilst I support on one hand, thinking it's fantastic they do that, on the other hand, I think it's a real indictment on our education system that that's actually the case. So pre-pandemic, we could already see from studies like PISA, TIMSS, PIRLS, etc., we could already see that the gap between advantaged and disadvantaged students was not narrowing at all. We were doing nothing to address that. And I think this is the problem. We need to find ways to directly address that so that that gap changes. Yep. Because at the moment, we're just not addressing that. We weren't pre-pandemic and we're not post-pandemic because none of that policy has changed.
So one of the things that we've been doing, particularly in response to COVID, but it has a more broader application, as you know, is the catch-up learning program, online tutoring-based program to try and really support young people, disadvantaged young people, and closing that gap that exists. Is that the sort of thing that you think is useful? And are there other things that can be really helpful as it relates to those outcomes?
Certainly, I think that program has shown itself to be useful. And I think that the key to it is the attention, the one-on-one attention that's given to students and the close learning opportunities. And I think that what we can learn from that is that that's what disadvantaged students in particular need and what they're not getting. So whilst there's debate about class size and, there's all the class size doesn't matter, etc., I firmly believe that class size does matter, particularly for disadvantaged students, because they do need more one-on-one attention, which they do not get in a class of 25. So if there could be something we would learn from that, it would be that the interventions need to come early and that they need to be on a one-on-one basis. So my ideal situation, for example, would be that we need to massively fund early childhood education, and we need to massively fund that in the areas in which it's needed. And that's what we've learned from that catch-up learning program, is that it does matter about the resources, and those resources need to be concentrated in the areas in which they're needed, and at enough so that it makes a difference.
So, I think in terms of the pandemic, significant challenges for young people's education, no question. And particularly that's apparent as it relates to digital access. And we know that digital access is so critical for a great education. It's a necessary part of our working life. It's a really important part, therefore, of education. And we certainly saw that play out for families through remote learning, and 15% of our families not having access to a digitally connected device. Can you just kind of paint a picture as to what you see as the implications of that for those families that aren't connected in their way? Any insights you've got on the size of the challenge and problem?
When we find families of 3 or 4 kids plus 2 parents working at home during the pandemic sharing one computer, how does that pan out in terms of kids learning? People need to be digitally literate. Kids need to be digitally literate. When I look at the amount of things now that require you to go online and fill out forms and do all those sort of things, you need to be able to do that sort of thing, and you're going to need to be able to do it more in the future. It's critical that we get kids doing it. And if they don't have access to the internet and they don't have access to those resources, they're going to fall behind their peers who have ready access to those resources. So, which is, widening that digital gap again.
Yeah. Thanks, Sue. And look, just in closing, and thanks for those insights. And look, we again appreciated your support and advice over the years in a number of ways. And one of the kind of unique dimensions of our work is the way in which we engage parents and carers.
Yeah.
And they're just vitally important in terms of a young person's education. Can you just kind of reflect on that, particularly as it relates to how we work with parents and carers and the importance of that as you see it?
To me, that's where the Smith Family Program really works and really shines among others, because it requires that parental engagement. Without that engagement, there's no program.
Thank you. Thanks for your time today and those insights. Really appreciate them. And thanks again for your long-standing leadership and research in addressing educational inequality. We really appreciate that. And thanks to you for joining us today for our conversations with the Smith family. Thanks very much.